Dacia Moore to you in just a little bit here. She's going to be doing our presentation today on Youth at Risk, which is a framework for working with angry and aggressive millennium clients. Before we do, for those of you who might be interested in getting CEUs for today's program, there's a link underneath the video window for you can apply for CEUs during the program. After it, we'll also send that link in our follow-up email. If you'd like to see Dacia's slides in a separate pop-up window, you'll see them in the regular video window as well, but if you'd like to see them in a separate pop-up window, there's a link to the slides as a PDF that you can also download to use those alongside today's program. There's also a link to Dacia's private practice, which we'll tell you about in just a second, as well as a link to purchase her new book, which is Why Are So Many Students Angry? And we're going to be talking about that a little bit today too. So, anytime you'd like to ask questions during the program, please take advantage of the chat feature that is directly below the video window. You'll see a little blue button that says Say. Type in your question or comment next to that, hit Say, and we'll ask those questions on your behalf at the close of the presentation. And so, let's introduce Dacia Moore. She is the president and founder of Second Wind Counseling and Consulting. She's a licensed professional counselor, an author, a trainer, a motivational speaker, a national board certified counselor. She's got her master's degree from Webster University, and she's an adjunct professor at teaching master's level courses at Webster University. She also serves as a board member for the American Counseling Association of Missouri and the Kansas City chapter of the American Counseling Association. Before starting her own company, she was the vice president of programs at a residential treatment facility where she routinely dealt with difficult diagnoses such as ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, depression, and bipolar disorder. Dacia had the honor of studying Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy under Dr. Albert Ellis. She's going to be talking about REBT, and she's got an advanced REBT certification from the Albert Ellis Institute. Dacia, thanks for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
All right, welcome everybody, and welcome to today's session. I hope that you'll learn lots. I'm going to be talking mostly about REBT. You have the slides that are there on your TV. We're not going to get to all of those slides. I'll just let you know that by now, or right off top. But we are going to get to the most important things, which are strategies on dealing with angry and aggressive youth. So let's go through the slides. Again, this is my book, Why Are So Many Students So Angry? And I have had many people ask me that question. Dacia, students have changed. Why are they so angry? And there are a number of reasons why students are so angry. I'm not going to get into all of them today because our main focus today is how do we help them to be less angry? And so that is really our topic for today. So what you're going to learn are some strategies by an overview of REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. I'm going to make sure that you hear some of the strategies in reality therapy because those two work really nicely together when you're working with angry and aggressive students. And then, of course, the strategies, which is what you want to know in terms of Dacia. In my private practice, in my public sector work, how do I help students, families, parents deal with anger? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Some of the diagnoses that we're going to cover that produce anger and aggressive behavior are ADHD, ADD, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, and even some symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Many times, if a student or a child is in a very hostile, difficult environment, they will externalize their behavior, which looks like angry and aggressive behavior. That could be a symptom of PTSD. On the other hand, they may internalize that behavior and it looks like depression, somatic complaints, and some other kinds of symptoms that, again, look like PTSD. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Quick overview of REBT. As Tom mentioned, and I do want to thank the Missouri Institute of Mental Health for having me here, Tom and Kelly and Joel and the others. As Tom mentioned, I studied REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, at the Institute, and that is my foundational theoretical orientation of choice. And REBT talks about how people sabotage, we sabotage ourselves. We have a natural tendency to think negatively. Now, if you think about that, 80% of the population has a natural tendency to be pessimistic in their thinking. And think about this. The last time you had some bad news or maybe you got an evaluation, a poor evaluation from your employer, How long did that stick with you versus when you got a good evaluation? So we have a tendency to remember and to give more energy to the negative than to the positive. And we sabotage ourselves by awfulizing that negative situation. And that's what angry, aggressive students do. So in our REBT, we talk about how we sabotage ourselves by thinking negatively, and we have unrealistic or irrational beliefs. Now, let me just say, when you have a client in your office, don't say, you have an irrational belief. Don't do that, okay? Because the fact is, all of us have irrational beliefs. Even myself, I've been through this training. I've been in private practice for over 10 years. Even with all of the mental health that I have encountered, I still struggle with irrational beliefs. So it's a human condition. And what we're trying to do with REBT is to teach people how to recognize their irrational beliefs and then how to dispute it. But the fact is, we all have, just like we all have issues, we all have irrational beliefs. So what we're trying to teach in REBT is, number one, it's called USA, Unconditional Self-Acceptance, learning how to accept yourself and all your frailties, learning how to accept other people and all their frailties and errors. The problem with angry, aggressive clients is that they are demanding and they're shoulding and they're saying things should be a certain way, and they get angry when they're not, instead of accepting whatever the situation is and being more flexible. So with REBT, we're trying to help them be more flexible in their thinking and not so rigid. We are also trying to teach what's called high frustration tolerance. Many people struggle with their emotions. Low frustration tolerance. I can't stand it. I wish things were different. It's awful. It's terrible. It's horrible. You've heard that before. We're trying to build their emotional muscles so that they can withstand negative emotions for longer periods of time and make sure the intensity is reduced. And then finally, we're wanting to teach our young people and adults, whoever your clientele is, you want to help them to be more flexible in their thinking. So those are the things that we're trying to do with REBT. So the goal of counseling is to develop a rational, flexible philosophy of life, to roll with the punches like we all have to do, and to not have that shoulding and demanding, or at least to reduce it so that they can be more flexible and rational in their thinking. So I'm going to actually skip a couple of slides and let's go to the ABCs of REBT. Now, I know you had this in your master's program. You had to have it in your theories course, most likely. So I'm going to refresh your memory just a little bit. A stands for, and I'm going to write this down here. What does A stand for? A stands for the activating event. Oh, it's amazing how when you get up in front of a board, your spelling goes down. Your ability to spell decreases. The activating event or the trigger. Now, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, with REBT, you do not have to know the whole story. Okay? When your client comes into the office, they want to tell you the story. And if they're a young person, they're going to want to tell you the whole story because it's their fault. It's not my fault. And let me tell you why, or what they did to me, why I behaved or acted the way that I did. You need to know a few details about the A, but you don't need to know the whole story. And it's important for me to tell you that because you could spend 1, 2, or even 3 sessions listening to the story and you haven't gotten to the intervention. With REBT, you can begin to treat that person the first session. You really can. You can help them start feeling better in the first session. But you have to manage, or at least listen to enough of the details to get a picture, but you don't need the whole story. B. B stands for the beliefs. And you have this in your slide. Now, the thing I like about REBT is that it goes very deep in terms of not just the self-talk, but your irrational beliefs. But I'll get back to that. So B stands for the beliefs, which are either rational or irrational. And remember, we're trying to help people develop a more rational thinking style. So we're going for a rational belief. C stands for the emotional consequence, which is how they feel. And that's why people come to you. They come to you because they feel bad, right? Nobody goes to a counselor, to a therapist, to a social worker, to a psychiatrist because they feel good. That's not what we get. We get people who feel bad. Okay. So they're going to come in and talk to you about how they feel. You're going to ask them questions about how they feel, and then they're going to tell you the story, right? And then D is the disputation. So, the two things that I want you to write down right now are two keys that if you improve in your effectiveness in these two areas, that will exponentially improve your treatment intervention. Number one is finding the right B. Finding the right B. And number two is disputing it. Okay. Those are the two areas that most of the counselors whom I work with struggle with because it takes skill to find the right B. So that's what I'm going to help you do, is how can you get better at finding the right irrational belief? The first thing you have to do is you have to teach the BC connection. That's foundational in REBT. The BC connection. And REBT is a teaching theory. So you're wanting to teach your clients what I'm teaching you so they can self-counsel when they're finished with you. Okay? We're not setting up a situation where in 6 months or in a year, they have to call you, hey, I need your help, I need your guidance, I don't know what to do. And they may do that and we give them a refresher, but you really want to teach them how to self-counsel so they can shoot down those irrational beliefs when they come up. Because as long as you're alive, those irrational beliefs are going to keep coming back. But you're teaching them how to dispute them. So what is the BC connection? Remember the ABCs we just reviewed? B is the self-talk, which is related to what my belief is about a situation. And C, what is the C? It's how you feel. So remember, when people first come to you, this is what they believe. What happened to me is why I feel the way that I do. What your job is to help them to see that this is not true, that really something happened to you, and what you believe about what happened to you is why you feel the way that you do. Okay? It is what you're saying to yourself, and then what you believe about yourself, about other people, that causes you to feel the way that you do. For example, I had a young lady in my office, teenager. She came in, she was upset with her teacher because her teacher embarrassed her. So we were talking and she would not stop talking about this teacher and how much she embarrassed her. So I said, well, tell me about your boyfriend. Guess what she did? Oh yeah, she was cheesing. She was smiling because she thought about something different and she began to feel differently. Very simple example. So as we talked about her boyfriend, it was a new boyfriend. You know, it's always nice at the beginning. It was a new boyfriend. She was smiling. She was happy. The sun came out. Birds were singing. And oh, this teacher just didn't matter anymore. Perfect example that I shared with her later in that meeting about what you think about has a direct connection to how you feel. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, John Johnson said it best. He's an entrepreneur. Just because something is easy to understand doesn't make it simple. Okay? So you understand what I'm saying to you, and your clients will understand what you're saying to them. But just because it's easy to understand does not make it easy to implement. And that's your challenge in helping them to implement what you're saying and practice it. All right, so the BC connection is where self-talk and feelings connect. So, Dacia, all right, you've shared this with me. I understand it. Now what? Because remember, the first key is finding the right the right belief. So this is what you can tell I'm a teacher. I love writing on the board. So, finding the core irrational beliefs is like gardening. Now, do any of you have lawns? All right. If you have a lawn, you also have dandelions, unless you did some fertilizing or the weed be gone earlier. So this is my dandelion. Yes, she's smiling. This is my dandelion. And this is grass. When you're working with a client, and you only work with their self-talk, their automatic thinking, you're pulling the head off the dandelion. But what happens in your yard when you just pluck the dandelion out of the grass? In about a day, maybe 2, it comes right back. Same thing with automatic thoughts. So what we're doing in REBT, and these are roots in case you didn't know what I was drawing, is we are trying to take the automatic thoughts and get to the belief. Okay, this is where we are trying to go with our clients. And how do you get there? Well, your slide shows 2 ways that I found to be the most helpful. One, the ladder of thoughts. This is a ladder in case you didn't know. And the ladder of feelings. Either one of those ladders will help you to identify the core irrational beliefs. Now, all of us have many irrational beliefs. So the question really isn't, are they there? Because they are there. The question that you have to ask is, which one is the core? Because if you picked one of these smaller ones, that would be good, and your dandelion wouldn't come back as quickly, but it would come back because you don't have the main root. So let me just draw. This stands for the main core issue, which is the main root, and that may take you some time to get to. So, the ladder of thoughts and the ladder of feelings. So what do I mean by that? Let me tell you. Some clients are thinkers. So they will say, well, I thought this or I said that. They are more cerebral or more cognitive. So those clients, you want to start with the ladder of thoughts, okay, or self-talk. Then you have some clients who are feelers. I felt this way, I felt that. Feelings are more predominant. They are more feeling oriented. So you want to start with the ladder of feelings. But whether you use the ladder of thoughts or the ladder of feelings, the general process is the same. And this is what you do. When X happened, when A happened, if they're a thinker, I want you to ask them, tell me what you were thinking. Tell me your self-talk. Now, remember, this is a teaching modality. So you've taught the BC connection, and you've talked about the internal conversation that all of us have. You even are thinking something now as I'm talking to you. I want you to stop that. No, just playing. So all of us have this internal conversation going on that is automatic. And that's what I mean by when you ask them, tell me what your self-talk is when A happened. And they will say, well, I thought, I don't know. You know what? I want you to take your client of concern, because there's a client that you're concerned about while you're even watching this show. So I want you to take a few minutes and see if you can come up with a few self-talk statements that your client most likely was thinking when the A happened, when whatever event happened. So let me take a client of concern of mine as an example. I have a client who is struggling with her adult daughter, who is going through some marriage issues. The adult daughter lives with my client. I'll use her as an example. Her thinking is, I'm a bad mother. And then she'll get into the shoulds. I should have been stricter. I should have not spoiled her as much. You know what, if you're a mother, you know what I'm talking about. So she'll get into the shoulds. I should have, and she'll go on and on and on. So when you have your client of concern and they're a thinker, then you want to ask them to list the self-talk that is connected to that particular event, and have them write down 3 to 5 phrases. And when I want to stress something here. Usually in my sessions, I take notes, and I ask permission to take notes. But I also ask my clients to bring a journal so that they can write things down. Because when you write something down, it looks much different than when it's rolling around in your head. So you would ask your client to write down, not just tell you, but to write down what they were thinking. Because that information, which I suggest they keep in a notebook, they can refer back to it, because what you'll find over time is that these thoughts come back time and time and time again. Actually, in my practice, I found that people say a handful of negative things to themselves over and over. And if they begin to see that pattern, they'll begin to believe you that, yes, what I'm thinking and what I believe is in fact connected to how I feel. So it's really an evidence-based model that you are beginning to develop with them on their own self-talk. So that's the ladder of thoughts, having them to write down the phrases that they're thinking when the event occurred. If they're a feeler, it's pretty much the same thing, but you ask them to write down what? Exactly, their feelings. So for this example, for instance, now she's more of a thinker, but when I asked her how she felt, what would be some normal feelings of how she felt? She felt angry, and excuse my back. She felt angry, she felt sad, disappointed. And who was she disappointed in? Herself. She felt disappointed. She felt guilty. She felt resentful. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make sure I say this before I forget, because I'm getting older, I forget stuff. You can do this with your teenagers, but it is not uncommon for them to come up with 3 to 5 feelings. But when you're working with a young person, they're only going to say this. But as a clinician, you know that anger is a secondary emotion. Okay? There is usually other emotions that are part of the anger that really are more prevalent, more important, more powerful than the anger. And usually these emotions are what is really bothering the person, and the anger just begins to bubble up when they don't know what else to do. So when you're working with a middle school person or a high school person, part of your job, and even an adult, because a lot of times adults don't know this, you have to teach them that anger is a secondary emotion. So you have to ask them, okay, what else were you feeling? And what else? And what else? You may have to, because many people do not have a wide emotional vocabulary. So you may have to give them some coaching on other feelings that they may be feeling that they can't put a label to. Important stuff, because if you can help people to expand their emotional vocabulary and they can put a label, and instead of saying I was angry, they can say I was frustrated, or they can say I was anxious. If they can identify it more correctly, then that's better for them in terms of dealing with it. You have to deal with the right emotion. Because if you're working with anger and I'm really anxious, you're working on the wrong thing, which is why it's so important to find the right B, because I don't want you working on the wrong thing. We want to work on the right thing. So we have our ladder of thoughts, our ladder of feelings, have them list 3 to 5 emotions that they were feeling, and then this is your question. How we're doing on time? Pretty good. Okay. This is your question for either one. What is the most disturbing thought, or if it's feelings, what is the heaviest or the most disturbing feeling? And have them put an asterisk by that. So for my client, her most disturbing thought actually was, I should have. And it was, I should have been stricter, or I shouldn't have spoiled her as much. I shouldn't have sheltered her as much. So I should have been stricter. So she put an asterisk by that, and I asked her, okay, if that is what you continue to say to yourself, what feeling went with that? And what would you say? What feeling would go with that statement? You're smart. All right. So I should have been stricter. Guilt. And again, it's guilt about how she did. Remember? So her upsetness, her disappointment, her anger toward her daughter was really about her anger or her guilt that she was feeling about doing things that she should have done. On the other side, if they're a feeler, you ask the same question. What feeling is the heaviest, that's what I say, or is the most disturbing? And she may have said guilty. And then we would have asked the corresponding question, well, what are you saying to yourself that is causing you to feel guilty? And she probably would have come back to this. So you can take either ladder. Am I making sense? Okay. You can take either ladder, but you want to ask the question and not just get into your talk therapy. REBT is a collaborative therapy where we are constantly checking in with our clients to make sure we're on the right track. So you're asking questions. Of course, you're developing a hypothesis in your mind about what's been going on, but let me tell you, I have been wrong. I know that's hard to believe, but I have been wrong on occasion where I thought, surely it's this. And I asked the client, so which one is the most disturbing for you? And she said something up here. So I adjusted my hypothesis, and that's what you do. As you go along, you ask questions. So this process will help you find the right irrational belief, and we call it, well, of course, it's the IB, the right IB, because you want to be working on the right thing. And you can feel it. Have you ever been in a session where it felt like, you know, we're just not really getting anywhere. It just doesn't feel like I'm making any headway. That's because you're not working, in my opinion, that's because you're not working on the right thing. The IB has a feeling to it, and I can't necessarily put it into words, but you'll know when you're on the right track. Sometimes there's emotion, few tears. Sometimes there's silence. Don't be afraid of silence, okay? Because silence is when your client is working out or thinking about what's troubling them. So when you ask a question, which of these has been the most disturbing for you, be quiet and let them think that through, because they're trying to figure it out. So silence and emotion are two tools that we use to see if we're going on the right road. It's kind of like if you're walking in a dark forest and you just have a lantern, and you're the guide with the lantern, and your client is walking alongside with you. You only have 1 or 2 steps in front of you that you can see. So those are that's the way that you go until you hear more about what direction to go in. Okay, you understand what I mean? So you have to ask questions. That is how you get to, or get closer to, the core irrational belief. Should I erase my pretty picture? It's just, I know it's gallery quality, but all right, so the 4 categories of irrational beliefs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to write this down. And this you do need to commit to memory. And what I used to do at the beginning of my career with REBT is I had a little cheat sheet. So, I had my little, legal pad. And at the back of the legal pad, I had these 4 categories. And every time the client was talking and I came up with a hypothesis, I may just flip my pad up and look to see what category it may have fallen into until I committed it to memory. But committing this to memory will help you dig a little bit deeper to find that core irrational belief. And here are the 4 categories. Number 1 is demandingness. I should do this, I should do that, things must be this way, I should have been a better mother, she should listen to me, I shouldn't be disrespected. You know what I'm talking about. The second one is awfulizing or catastrophizing. It's awful, it's terrible, it's horrible. And then the associated, I can't stand it, is the low frustration tolerance. And then finally, you have negative, global, or self-evaluations. So as an example, I did some training at for some school counselors just last week. And one of the young ladies, very nice young lady, she kept saying, well, we should be acting as a team. And if my principal was better, then my school would be so-and-so. My school would be calmer. And I said, you're shoulding on yourself, young lady. And she wasn't even aware of it. But shoulds, when you hear your client saying a lot of shoulds, I should have done this, I should have done that, that is in the category of demandingness. Because really, according to Dr. Albert Ellis, where is it written that we should do anything? It's not written anywhere. Now, that is one of the disputations that you can use. Don't use that too early because folks will get defensive. But the truth is that other than breathe, eat, let's see, we have to drink, we have to eat, and we have to pay taxes. Other than that, I mean, our behavior can be along a continuum of anything. So shoulding and musting and awfulizing really are value judgments of how we think other people should behave, and when they don't behave that way, we get upset. But we cannot control other people. We can only control ourselves. So with the demandingness, you are listening for shoulds and oughts. Okay, those are the key words. And what you're doing is taking notes and maybe even writing down that self-talk, or have your client write it down. And then depending on whether or not it's related to the core irrational belief, you can address it. But you're really just listening for the shoulding. For the awfulizing, that's more of a sense of things should be a different way, and since they're not, my life is terrible. I should have married better. The client of concern that I was just sharing with you, she talked about how she shouldn't have had sex out of wedlock, and now she had a daughter that she really wasn't prepared to have. So she had a lot of shoulds and then a lot of awfulizing because she was downing herself, which I have found to be at the core of a lot of irrational beliefs, is a negative self-evaluation. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not smart enough. But you can't, I mean, even if you suspect that's what it is, remember, we're guides. So you can't jump ahead and say, ooh, you have an irrational belief, and I hear it. You can't do that. You have to gently guide your client so they become aware of it, which is why I like my clients to write things down, because after about 3 or 4 sessions, they will begin to see the pattern. Man, I really think negatively about myself. I don't like myself very much. That light bulb has to come on in their heads, even though you may see it earlier. Ask questions. You know, last session and even today, you're really kind of beating yourself up a lot. Have you noticed that? They may say yes, they may say no, but you're asking a question to get them to consider that their self-talk is making them feel bad. Okay? All right, so the 4 categories of irrational beliefs: commit to memory. A question that I often get when I do this training is, well, how will I know what to work on if they have a lot of irrational beliefs in each of those categories? And the truth is, the categories do mix. Okay, you won't just have a person thinking in one category. They probably have irrational beliefs in all of them, as we all do. They kind of all go together. Things should be a different way, and since they're not, it's awful, and I can't stand it, and I'm a bad person. Well, that's all 4 of them right there. So your key is, again, to use the ladder of thoughts or the ladder of feelings to ask the question, which one of these is causing you the most distress? And then work from there. So, for instance, with my client of concern, the one that was causing her the most distress was, I should have been stricter. And so my follow-up question was, all right, when you say to yourself, you should have been stricter, what else do you say? So you see, we took that and then dug a little bit deeper. Well, she came up with 2 or 3 other things that she said, one of which was, I must be a bad mother. So when you continue to dig down, and again, it's a process, you will find the irrational belief that is causing the most disturbance, and then you ask the same question. When you think that or when you feel that way, tell me, what else do you feel? It's called the and what else strategy. Actually, it's a disputation in REBT. And what else? So you want to keep digging down until you hit a rock, and then you start dealing with that core. Okay? I know it's a lot, but it's good stuff, and it works. It really does. All right. Because what is necessary to change a person is to change their awareness of himself. That's what Abraham Maslow said. Our job as clinicians is to help our clients to change their awareness of themselves by asking questions and by knowing what road to take, knowing what questions to ask, so that they can look at what they're thinking and decide perhaps to think something that doesn't make them feel as badly as what they're currently thinking. So our job is to help them change their perception of themselves. So when we're dealing with angry and aggressive clients, there are a number of emotions that are typical. Anxiety, depression, guilt, anger. Those are actually the four most common negative emotions that we come across in our line of work. Anxiety, depression, guilt, and anger. And each of those negative emotions has a corresponding self-talk with it, and actually a number of things that a client will say. So you can even get with a colleague at your place of business and brainstorm, okay, if my client of concern is feeling depressed, what are some typical things that they are saying to themselves about their life? You know, depression has a very people who are depressed have a very pessimistic outlook, and their thinking is extremely negative. So that's not difficult in terms of brainstorming, because if you can begin to brainstorm what these negative self-talks might be, then you can do the next thing, which is the disputation. And I want to move on to that because we have about, 20 minutes left. Change is painful. Most people won't change until the current pain exceeds the pain of change. So the people that you see in your office, if they're coming voluntarily, they're in a great deal of pain. Of course, if they're mandated, they may feel like it's everybody else's fault, and they may not be in enough pain just yet. Maybe they haven't hit rock bottom, but you can still work with those people as well. But the folks who are motivated to change are the ones who are in so much pain that they're like, okay, I have tried everything else and it's not working. What do you have to offer me? And you do have something to offer them, and you can help them feel better. That's why I love REBT, because it does work. All right, so let's get to disputations. I mentioned to you there are two things that you need to get good at. One is working on the right B. Okay, working on the right B. The second thing is, now that you found the right B, what do you do with it? When I was a younger therapist, not that I'm that old now, but some years ago, I think there was one client in particular where she left my office feeling bad. And I thought to myself, that's not a good idea because when people feel bad, they do things like get in arguments, and God forbid, I'm not even going to say, but you know what I'm talking about, okay? They may hurt themselves or they may hurt somebody else. So I thought and I talked to my supervisor, and I thought, you know, I didn't do something. I missed something here. So that's why I want to share with you this next key issue, which is the number 2 skill that's important for you is to dispute the irrational belief. In your sessions, when you find an irrational belief to work on, you don't let your client leave before you dispute it. So that may mean some time management on your part, if you only have an hour with them and you've got clients back to back. But it's important that you at least approach the disputation and give them that homework or that practice work, whether it be a middle school student or an elderly person. But you give them something new to say so that they can begin the process of rejuvenating their thinking. So there are 3 types of disputations: logical, empirical, and practical. And since we're running low on time, I'm going to go over those really, really quickly so we can get to another slide that I really want to make sure that I cover with you. Number 1 is a logical dispute. And the logical dispute is, does this make sense? So let's take a look at my client of concern's irrational belief, which was, at the core, it was, I'm a bad mother. Now you can tell that I write things down. I write things down to make sure that I'm using the client's language. I write things down to make sure that I don't forget. Because your irrational beliefs or your client's irrational beliefs can, or what you're working on, can change from session to session. But what you'll find when you write them in your notes is that you'll begin to see the theme. So, I'm a bad mother. A logical disputation is that really true? Well, help me to, I want you to tell me, what are some characteristics of a bad mother? That's a disputation. What are some characteristics of a bad mother? You're in the public service sector, you're in the private sector. We know what bad parents look like, okay? Bad parents leave their children unattended, they abuse their children, they neglect their children, there's no food in the refrigerator, they go off for days on end. We know what bad parents look like, right? So, but she feels so badly about herself that that's all she can see is, I'm a bad parent. So I ask her, okay, if you're a bad parent, let's do some compare and contrast. Describe to me and write down some characteristics of a bad mother. So she's writing down no food, neglectful, abusive. And then what's the follow-up question? Do you do any of those things? So is it really true then that you're a bad mother? Well, they see I feel like I'm a bad mother. I get that. I'm a mother. I have 2 children, 21 and 23. You know I have felt that way on occasion. But it's not true. Just because you feel a certain way does not make it true. So that's the logical disputation, is looking at or having them characterize something and then comparing it with how they feel. Is this really logical? The second type of disputation is, where is the evidence? And this works nicely with the logical disputation. Where is it written that you must be a perfect mother to be a good mother? Nowhere. See, this is the equation that most people have. Performance equals self-worth. Don't you find that to be true? If I perform well, or if my child performs well, if my child does good in school, if my child does all the things that I think she should do, I have girls, so I'm talking about my kids, then that means I'm a good mother. And when my child, this is her equation, when my child behaves poorly, makes poor choices, that means that I'm a bad mother. No. That is an incorrect equation, because, and then this is the disputation, because your child has free will. So where is it written that you have the power to make your child do everything you want her to do? It's not written anywhere. So that's the empirical disputation. And then finally, practical. And that's kind of where I'm working with her. The practical disputation is, if you continue to think this way, and we have gone through actually all of these disputations, and this final one, as I worked with her this about 2 weeks ago, do you want to feel better? If you want to feel better, and it's clear that you are not a bad mother, and it's clear that just because you struggled or made some poor choices, that doesn't have anything to do with your self-worth. If you want to feel better, perhaps you should think something differently. You know what she said to me? Dacia, I have tried to think something differently, but I just, I'll start thinking it, and then I'll begin to think this other, I'm a bad mother, and it'll come right back. Do you weed your garden, or do you try to kill the dandelions in your garden just one time? No. The analogy that I use is that when people come to us, they have a field of dandelions. So we have to continuously apply weed killer over a period of time to get that field from a field of dandelions to a field of grass. And even when we get to the field of grass, you are still going to have some dandelions pop up here and there. It is never ending. And what I said to her is, dear, You have to intentionally, continuously, and with effort dispute. The phrase that we came up with is, I wasn't a perfect mother. I did the best that I could, and I think I did a pretty good job. It was something like that. You have to say that over and over and over to yourself for maybe months before you begin to feel like, yeah, I was a good mother. You gave her shelter, you gave her food. You understand what I'm saying? So this disputation takes effort. And it's intentional. So when you're working with angry, aggressive clients, and they're saying something like, I must not be disrespected, or I must not be embarrassed, and then you dig down to what the core rational belief is, which is probably something related to their self-worth. You know, I don't feel very good about myself. Then you have to give them something new to say, which is truthful, but it speaks to that irrational belief. So let me give you one strategy. We've got about 8 minutes left, and I think there are about 30 slides that I haven't gotten to. So you'll just have to have me back, Tom. All right. Here's one strategy that I want you to be sure and get. It's called the circle strategy. And basically, on a piece of paper, you draw a circle. And you ask your client, particularly if they're a young person, but this works with any age group. All right, tell me some things that you like about yourself. And they will give you pluses. Now, tell me some things that you think you need to work on. Those will be minuses. This is a depiction of every human being on this planet, because we all have things that we're good at, and we all have things that we need work on. So this is a disputation that you can use when you have a client who believes that I'm a bad person, or I must have done something wrong, why my mother is out doing drugs, or I must be a bad mother. Well, tell me the characteristics that you like about yourself as a mother. What are some things that you need help with? And again, you ask the question, this probably looks like other people's circle. Let me draw my circle, or have them draw the circle of somebody that they admire. If you're working with a school-age child, have them draw maybe their competitor or their best friend. Guarantee it'll be the same thing, because we are all imperfect, right? So that is one way to dispute the I'm a bad mother. You're not all bad, but you're also not all good. And expecting yourself to be all good, expecting yourself to be perfect, is irrational, right? Okay. Let's see what other slides we have here. Oh, more strategies. Great one, coin in hand. Does anybody have a coin in here? Just any kind of coin. And this is the same thing that you would do with your client. You would ask them, do you have a coin? So thank you, Tom. All right, so Tom has given me a quarter. I want this to be a $50. I want this to be a $50. This should be a $50. It's a quarter. But I want it to be a $50. This is a great and very, you get my point. No matter how much you tantrum, no matter how much you demand, you are not going to change the reality of this being a quarter. So perhaps, if you can't change this reality, perhaps you can say, I really wish this were a $50. But it's a quarter, so therefore I'm going to have to accept that it's a quarter. Can I keep this quarter, Tom? No, just kidding. Here you go. Thank you. Very easy disputation. to point out demandingness and how demandingness does not change reality. If we had 10 of your peers, great disputation. And this really works with young people. So you find the core irrational belief, or at least the one for the day. And then you ask, if we had 10 of your peers in here, how many of them do you think would either believe what you believe or do what you did? Let's say they, if we're talking about a high school student, let's say they stormed out of the room, and of course they could do much worse things, but we'll just keep it light. So they stormed out of the room and they slammed the door and they went to the principal's office. So if we had 10 of your peers, how many of them would have responded in the same way that you did? And be quiet. They'll probably say, well, all of them. You know how kids are. Well, you know that's not true. All of them wouldn't have done that. Now, come on, Johnny, be honest. Some of them would have done it, but some of them would have responded a different way. How many of them do you think would have responded the same way you did? And they may say, well, half of them. Then the question is, okay, if half of them, 5 of them, responded in the same way that you did, and half of them did not, what's the difference between the two? So no matter what they say, it could be one of them or it could be all 10 of them. But whatever they say, you want to distinguish between what they did or how he responded or she responded and the other people. And then the question is, what's the difference? And I'm asking you, what's the difference? The difference is in perception, which means that you could have made a different choice. Because if other people made a different choice, you can make a different choice. All right, we have about 3 minutes left. Are there any questions that I need to?
Yeah, we got a couple of comments and a couple of questions that have come in, Dacia. First comment that came in a while back said that usually the auto thoughts occur so quickly that they're not noticed.
Yeah.
Then the first question that came in here, she asks, so there appears to be an overlap with mindfulness.
Can be. Can be. And let me just talk about the auto thoughts. Part of your job is you can use mindfulness certainly to calm your clients down and to slow them down. Most people don't think about their thinking. They're not aware of their thinking or that internal conversation. So part of your job is to help them become aware of it. Universally, the first practice assignment that I give is to have people to begin to journal their self-talk because they're not aware of it. And unless you have some ADD, ADHD going on where they have racing thoughts, other than that, your job is to help them to tap into their automatic thoughts. But that is key, because if they can't catch them, they won't be able to dispute them. So that is an important part of, and that may take you some time. And I have run across clients who can't hear they don't have the insight, and it does take them a couple more sessions to get it.
So how do you deal with the client who refuses to acknowledge that their beliefs are irrational despite being offered repeated disputations?
Then you go to the reality therapy strategies, which I don't think we're going to get to. But if you know reality therapy, and it's in your handout, let me see if I can get to it real quick. And we may not have time. Reality therapy talks about, okay, who is responsible for your behavior? Then that's the question. If they don't want to acknowledge that their thinking is irrational, then the question is, okay, who is responsible for your behavior? And then you go into the we dip. Okay, what do you want? What are you doing? Let's evaluate it and then come up with a plan. And I know that's really quick, but you will come across clients who don't want to, because it takes effort to dispute your thinking, and they don't want to put forth the effort. Then you go to the reality therapy with it, which is, okay, then let's come up with a plan. Because it doesn't matter what your thinking is. With reality therapy, you can behave your way into new feelings. So you can think whatever you want, but what you do is what we're going to look at.
And lastly, it looks like something you said triggered 2 words, positive affirmations.
Yeah, positive affirmations are very close, but affirmations I see as more superficial. You're really digging down to some core beliefs that generally are developed in childhood about oneself. So the positive affirmations can be helpful with the disputation, but disputations are really a deeper level of getting to a core belief that I feel about myself and about the world.
Seems to me like we could have gone on at least another hour.
No.
Nice, enthusiastic presentation, Dacia.
Thank you.
We appreciate the
I love
information you
this
brought
stuff.
to us. Good. Well, we thank you for being here, folks. We thank you for joining us this afternoon. For those of you who missed the link to the slides underneath the video window, that was, if you scroll down there, there's a link for the slides there, slides and handouts. You can download those as a PDF. Also, if you're interested in getting CEUs for today's program, there's a link to apply for CEUs there as well as a link to Dacia's website, and, of course, how to pick up her book. We got to plug the book. Got to make sure we do that. So, if you're not on our email list before, you will be now. You'll get a follow-up email from us probably in the next day or so with these links back included in them. We encourage you to join our email list, or encourage your colleagues to join our email list, because that's primarily how we do publicize the things we do here at the Missouri Institute of Mental Health. We've gotten really cheap over the last few years. So, thank you for joining us today. Dacia, thanks for your time and your expertise.
Thank you for having me. Bye.